Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day. Can you start by introducing yourself and what office you're running for?
Absolutely. Well, Ben, it's an honor to be here. My name is Jonas Moya. I'm a fourth generation rancher from Tucumcari, New Mexico, former Biden Harris appointee, and I'm running for New Mexico Public Land Commissioner.
So, a lot of people are not familiar with the land commissioner position at all, or even who's running for it. Can you give us a sense of, who you are in so many words, a short little recap of who you are and why your background is really important to the office that you're running for?
Absolutely. And I love that question because I am a product of New Mexico. That's who I am. I was born in New Mexico. I was actually born in Albuquerque. I went to public schools in New Mexico. I went to public school in Tucumcari, as well as most of my public school educations from House, New Mexico, which is a very tiny school, less than 100 kids, K through 12. And then I went on to New Mexico State University, and I have built a career here in New Mexico, and I hope to build a family here one day. So I'm a New Mexican through and through, and I'm running for public land commissioner, not because and it's a very cool job, but because I believe my resume speaks to the job, right? You got to have the experience if you want to run a large office like the land office. And being a fourth generation rancher, I bring a big perspective of public lands and land management and stewardship. But besides that, I just got done serving under the Biden-Harris administration, where I had 74 employees, 22 different field offices, and a multi-million-dollar budget. So having that land experience plus that administrative experience, and then also just working in policy through a number of different avenues over the years, whether it was from New Mexico First, as a civic engagement public policy manager, or running the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association, where I was helping them diversify and be in a lot of different policy when it comes to growing agricultural industries and making sure that the farmers and ranchers are successful here in New Mexico. So I bring that wide range of experience and that New Mexico know-how because I'm a product of New Mexico.
And so you kind of talked a little bit about why you decided to run, but I guess, yeah, give us a little bit more insight into like why you decided to move or to approach this office, given some of the other things that you've worked on.
Absolutely, because my unique view of being from rural New Mexico, that voice is often not amplified in Santa Fe like it should be, especially since the majority of New Mexico is rural. That was one of the reasons why I decided to run. But the second reason, the more important reason, is because I'm wanting to stay here the rest of my life, and I want to encourage and build good policy that keeps New Mexicans here. I've graduated with so many people that actually live in Dallas and Phoenix and Denver, and they want to be in New Mexico, but because of the opportunities here and them growing a family, they just cannot financially make it work. So I believe the land office can also be a good amplifier in making sure that we're creating sustainable economies with high skilled labor, as well as an economy that provides a good paycheck for those that stay here, right? So we can eventually build a family and buy a house and live out the New Mexican dream, which I call, the house, the dog, and being able just to enjoy our outdoors. And as a land commissioner, I would do that. I would work very hard to provide those opportunities while protecting our public lands.
Who is a figure, like a political figure, statewide or national, that you think, or that you would consider like a political inspiration for you?
Yeah. I've been asked this question twice so far in the political campaign trail. So one local figure is my uncle Ralph Moya. He passed away in 2024. He was a longtime city councilor and mayor of Tucumcari, and his attitude was always about helping others and making sure you're building up community by being present, working hard, and actually getting really hands-on and to make sure that those projects succeed with limited resources. So I take his memory as well as what he's done in the past part of my campaign trail and make it part of who I am, and it adds to the values that I have as a New Mexican.
Maybe what about a national figure that you think is important to you?
Oh, well, for a national figure, I actually have two of them. I actually have a lot of respect for Secretary Vilsack. He was a governor of Iowa, and he was actually a 2-time serving USDA Secretary of Agriculture, which is rare. Usually, whenever you become a cabinet secretary, you only get it once. So he was cabinet secretary under President Obama, which is also an inspirational figure for me, and President Joe Biden as well. So he was a great leader. He provided some great opportunities, and I like to kind of model my own leadership styles after him.
Let's talk about policy priorities, and I think it's helpful to give people a limited amount of things. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about, but if you had to give 3 or 4 like major policy positions or platforms that you think people would vote for and that will vote for you for, what would those 3 to 4 main policy positions be?
Perfect. Well, the big one is diversifying our revenue streams to our public lands. So currently we get a lot of revenue from oil and gas. And as everyone knows, oil and gas is a boom and bust industry. So we need to continue to diversify and be a little more aggressive in that diversification into more renewable energies, as well as geothermal and affordable housing. And affordable housing is going to be something I'm going to push hard in the beginning, because right now there's so many New Mexicans that are just priced out, whether you're living in Santa Fe or you're living in Albuquerque, or you're just trying to find a livable, acceptable house in rural New Mexico. So I'm going to work with developers and those that want to work in those communities with possibly long-term leases or maybe even land swaps to get that project done. But diversify. That's my goal.
And so that's great. Are there other things outside of that you might also want to throw in there? It sounds like there's an emphasis on industry. There's an emphasis on what to do with that money as far as like housing initiatives. Any other things that people can kind of latch onto you as a specific candidate?
Absolutely. And so having experience coming in after a Trump administration, it adequately prepares me to actually fight during this current Trump administration, because as you know, in the beginning, he wanted to come after our public lands. So we're going to continue as a state, and especially the leadership throughout the state, to amplify the message that our lands are not for sale. Whether you're going to sell our BLM land or any other public lands nationally that's next to state lands, we're going to continue to be a rock for New Mexico and make sure that whatever industries come over there are not impeding on the lives of New Mexicans, and especially the quality of life, right? When it comes to fresh air, clean water, all those basic human rights. Another thing you can really count on me for is making sure that I'm providing job opportunities in rural areas. Right now we have a heavy concentration of jobs in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and I think as a state employer, right, we're going to have some opportunities to provide some remote jobs or some jobs in our field stations. We have 11 field stations throughout the state for the state land office, so I want to make sure to priority hire in those areas, and that could be one more mechanism that's going to make sure that small towns don't disappear. And I've seen that on the federal level. As state FSA director, which was the Farm Service Agency, I saw how big of an impact that the jobs in my service centers provided for those towns. It's one more person in there with a high-paying job, benefits like health insurance and retirement, and it allows them the opportunity to create a family there. So that's another big priority for me, is jobs, right? Jobs, growing economy, and really balancing land stewardship with those opportunities. And I think that's really what we need as New Mexicans. Of course, I think everyone that's running as a Democrat wants to obviously protect our lands, provide more opportunities for access, such as designated camping grounds, but really focusing on jobs and having the know-how to get it done is what I bring to the table. Because like I said earlier, experience really matters in this position, and you're only really guaranteed 4 years at a time. So going in from day one and not having to have a big learning curve, but going in, introducing myself to staff, identifying the trends and challenges that are going on the ground at the state land office, and then seizing the opportunity for those low-bearing, easy things to get done is what I'm ready to do, and I hope to get it done.
Just as far as like making the case for like primary voters, which are usually, in the Democratic sense, more towards that base. Yeah. What is your approach for garnering more support from the Democratic base for this primary session or part of the campaign?
Well, I love that question too, and I'm not your typical Democrat, right? I'm from Tucumcari, rural New Mexico. I still have a cattle ranch back home. I wear a cowboy hat like I'm wearing today, and so like typically when people see me, they're like, "This guy has to be a Republican." But no, I've been a Democrat my entire life. I'm a Democrat through and through, and my values align with the Democratic Party. And what I'm trying to show people is, because I'm a new face to the party, I'm trying to earn their trust and really communicate to them how my experience will really heighten the job and really add to the value that's already there. The state land office brings in about $2 billion annually, and to make sure that we maintain those levels, we got to have somebody with some real experience. And yeah, I'm not going to shy away that I've had some hurdles to overcome, right? I didn't get the delegates at pre-party convention. I only got about 72 delegates when you needed almost over 200 to really get that stamp of approval without having to get additional signatures. So then I had to go back to the drawing board, and within 24 hours, I had about 1,000 signatures, and then another 24 hours, I had another 700 signatures. So within 48 hours, I had 1,700 additional signatures, which maintained and kept me on the ballot. Because that's what matters at that point, is making sure you could give the voters of New Mexico, especially those that are participating in the primary convention, or not the primary, but those that are participating in the primary voting, a real opportunity to see the entire field. So you got 3 candidates, all diverse backgrounds, all different, lived experiences. And that gives the voter a real option. And that's what I wanted to do for the voters of New Mexico, is say, hey, this cowboy from Eastern New Mexico is a Democrat through and through, and brings the lived experience and the know-how to make sure that we're successful at the state land office.
Just on that topic of like support, groups of people who have been kind of showing up for you, who has endorsed you so far, and why do those endorsements matter to you?
Yeah. So I really don't have any concrete endorsements yet. You can ask my friends, my neighbors. Those obviously are the endorsements that I'm getting right now, and those are true voters, right? Those are guaranteed votes on June 2nd when the election is. So I'm working with a few other groups. I'm going through the endorsement process. I've been doing a lot of interviews to hopefully get some endorsements outside of my friends and neighbors, but I'm so thankful to have their support, and that's what it's coming down to. This is a real grassroots, from the bottom up campaign. This isn't something that that I've been prepping for a long time. If you would have asked me a year and a half ago, hey Jonas, are you going to run for land commissioner? I was like, nah, I don't know. I just left the Biden-Harris administration. I want to focus on my ranch. I got a lot of work over there. And after some deep thoughts and some conversations of looking at the job and the requirements of that job, it was a no-brainer for me to say, let's jump in this. And so I was a brand new face to the Democratic Party, had to build up from the bottom and really gain some trust. And I think that's just going to continue to show as time moves on. And I'm happy to be here. And like I tell everybody, I'm a young Democrat, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm a New Mexican through and through. And the funny thing is, it's a little bit on the grim side, but I already know where I'm going to be buried in New Mexico. We have a family cemetery there back at home. So I'm here for the long run.
Yeah. When you're considering like strategy leading up to June and the next couple months, like what is your strategy for trying to kind of take that grassroots movement and push to a bigger field?
So right now, and we talked a little bit about how the most recent poll that was done by someone else in the race showed that he was first, and then Matthew McQueen was second, and then myself was third. But everybody was under 30%, and that was about 580 voters, more or less, that would turn out to a Democratic primary to vote that was surveyed. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And the strategy from today until the end of this race is to focus on counties and show up and talk to people where they're at. So I'm planning to do a road tour pretty soon, where I'm going to be going to every corner of the state of New Mexico and showing up and having coffee or having lunch or dinner and talking about what New Mexicans want from the land office. So I'm going to slowly map out some counties that I hopefully can win. I want to win Bernalillo County, believe it or not, and really show up for the people of Bernalillo County. But as well as counties like Quay County, Curry County, Roosevelt, and Lee, and Harding. So I want to show up to them as well, and I'm gonna go out there, meet them where they're at, and hopefully earn their respect and earn their vote June 2nd.
This is a little bit different, but I think it's kind of relevant, especially since you have experience through the Biden and Harris administration. there's been a lot of things that have changed like since then, and politics have changed. Democratic politics have changed a lot. What lessons have you learned since the last statewide election cycle a couple years ago about where the Democratic Party is?
Man, I think what I learned personally from just, showing up in rural communities, working with career staff, is that I think all voices of New Mexico need to be amplified. And the really exciting thing is that this Democratic primary, independents can actually go up on voting day and pick a side of who they want to vote for. And I think upping participation early on with folks to vote is going to make a big impact in making sure that we have the right voices that are leading our state. Because there's so much opportunity to grow here that we need people to, one, feel confident to step up and really put themselves out there to run, and then two, encourage people just to educate themselves on the vote, on the candidates, and then show up on those days to vote or vote early, right? So what I've learned is just outreach is important, communication is important, having a clear message and multiple avenues to share that message so that false narratives are not out there for people to consume. We need to make sure, especially during this Trump administration, where you got to take everything with a grain of salt, that the truth and the facts are out there for the public to access, and that they understand that this is how the process works, and they're more than welcome to always be a part of that process. What I also understood is that we got to continue to move forward and be more diverse in our staffing, in our places that we're showing up and to be present and to have conversations in. So just being more diverse in that setting as well is going to give New Mexico a further leg up and being successful and growing our state, not only on a local level, but on a national standpoint as well.
And kind of in that relationship of like national politics, how people are kind of approaching their local things with that, with that hanging over it, it's like kind of hard to separate them. Nationally, like the Democratic Party is like really unpopular. How do you kind of strike that balance with primary voters and like your not just personal like connections with the previous administration, but also like in general, you're trying to get the Democratic Party's candidacy. How do you strike that balance of like where primary voters might be feeling about the Democratic Party in general right now?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this. For one, going back to, it's already 2024, right? November, where we woke up and said, wow, Trump's actually gaining a lot of ground and he's going to win this thing. I think that was a big wake-up call for the Democratic Party in general, that we need to go back to the drawing board and figure some things out. And especially when it comes to the process of getting a candidate to where they're running for the national spotlight and having a lot more say-so on the ground. So making sure that all Democrats feel heard and seen, so that they don't feel like they're left out and that they have to then turn like independent or decline to state. We want to keep them here with the Democratic Party because I believe we do represent everybody, and especially the values of small towns and folks that want to grow and succeed, and we give them the opportunities and the tools to do that. So I think the Democratic Party has definitely changed, and we're trying to be a little more diverse, inviting, and we're also trying to make sure that rural voices and voices that are typically not heard are heard in this conversation when it comes to the upcoming elections. Mm-hmm. And I really believe you're going to see a big blue wave hit because, there's been parts of Texas already in congressional districts that have gained a lot of ground. There's been some typical red areas throughout the country that are starting to flip. And I really see that Trump's actions are finally being seen by his major base and saying, wow, this guy's not okay, and it's not okay to support him. Although, there was some landmines that some of his diehard voters have, stepped on, that I'm really kind of shocked that they would do that, But I think that a little more light is being seen on both sides, and that we're seeing that we need to come back to the middle and have people that work for everyday working folks, or people that are trying to graduate or get through school and find an opportunity for them to grow, or those that are even just trying to search for opportunities. We need to get back into the middle and find people that are going to represent those that are just trying to live outside of paycheck to paycheck and actually be able to grow as an individual.
What are your thoughts on the predecessor, the current land commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richard? What do you feel about her legacy?
Wow. I mean, she's leaving some big shoes to fill at the land office. I think she's done an amazing job. And actually, up until the point when she actually exits office, I think she's still working very hard. There's some big policy that's coming down the pipeline in her office that she's going to really get a concrete in, hopefully, before she leaves. So she's left an amazing legacy. I'm just going to go in there, hopefully, to continue that legacy and uphold those values that she brought to the office, and make sure, too, that our public lands are being taken care of and that they're being used appropriately, because there's so many different types of leases, and we want to make sure that we're following the law to the T, and that those that count on the revenues from the leases are being represented well, and those revenues are coming in and at a steady flow.
We definitely had a lot of questions come through from our audience about some specific issues. So I just want to make sure that we kind of get to those as well. So yeah, one of the questions is, do you support upholding the decision to reject pipelines for Project Jupiter, which is the massive data center in southern New Mexico?
So strategically, yes. If it's not adding benefits to our public lands, then we do not want to participate in those projects. But if they add benefits to our public lands and it's going to be case by case basis, then we want to make sure to be good partners. Because what I want to see New Mexico grow, or what I want to see New Mexico move into, is the growth phase, right? So many states around us are growing and people are being able to buy homes. I'm going back to housing and being able to afford a family. And that's what I want to position New Mexico into. So if it does add value to our state lands, yes, we're going to be a good partner. We're going to work with them to make sure that those transmission lines are there, so that power doesn't stay in one spot. It actually moves outside to where it can be consumed from folks. So any other projects that are not beneficial, we need to move away from and rethink and go back to the drawing board.
Do you have a position on the proposed takeover of PNM by Blackstone?
I definitely do. I'm opposed to it. I would like to see actually a different proposal move forward. Maybe something into the tone of maybe a small percentage of New Mexico being able to actually purchase PNM. But I think we really need to go back to the experts and look at what the options are and how it's going to benefit New Mexico, and if we can afford it, right? I think we can afford it, but we also want to make sure we're providing reliable transmission and reliable availability of electricity and the other services that they provide at PNM. So we need to go back to the drawing board, but anytime private equity comes in, I feel like it's been a general trend that they forget about the end user, and they care more about their share prices and how that product that they purchase or that industry that they purchase is returning their money on their investment. So I want to look more into an investment opportunity or a partner that's actually going to invest in New Mexico and make sure that we're growing and being successful here on the ground.
Do you have a strategy for holding oil and gas companies accountable, like, for example, the orphaned well situation in the Permian Basin?
Yeah, so this is a big question that's always on the campaign trail. So I think, and I know, that New Mexico already produces some of the cleanest, most safe oil and gas in the country, if not in the world. Probably even in the world standards. We have set the example of how to actually extract oil and gas in a clean, safe manner. So I want to continue to uphold those, and then any bad actors, especially those that are not paying their fair share when it comes to capping wells, they need to be held accountable, because we're not going to right away wean ourselves off of oil and gas, because they do contribute quite a bit of money, actually the majority of the money, to our education system. But we want to make sure that we're holding them to the highest standard, and we're using the technology that's available to make sure we're providing a clean, safe environment in that production of oil and gas. And then when it comes to paying their fair share, they must pay their fair share. And I think everybody, at least on the Democratic ticket, can agree with me on that we're going to step in there, make sure that those orphan wells are not being passed on to the taxpayer and New Mexicans having to pick up the tab. It's got to be oil and gas.
You mentioned that we do need to hold oil and gas companies accountable, but what mechanisms will exist for you in your office so that that can actually happen, so that they can't weasel out, that they can't circumvent the process?
Absolutely. So there's already some really good checks and balances in place, and it's just a matter of making sure we're implementing them right in real time. So making sure that we're uh, implementing policy that keeps oil and gas drilling away from schools with at least like a 6 to 10 mile buffer. That would be huge. As well as doing air tests and water tests and a lot of monitoring that's already happening. We need to continue to make sure that monitoring is funded well and that we're doing it, not just saying it, and then actually having results to look back on and create this historical timeline of saying, this is what it looked like before, this is how it's moved in the direction with industry there. And that's any industry. I think we need to make sure to rely on data. One thing I used to do was research, and at New Mexico State, I loved going back and looking at the data. And data is going to tell us the story of if we're doing it right or if we're doing it wrong. And then also, if we're paying attention, we could actually say, well, look, we're catching it early enough with the results that we're getting that we need to change directions to be actually more proactive on something that could be a disaster later on. So relying on data, enforcing what we already have, and being more aggressive about that in the future.
Do you feel like the state, we kind of talked a little bit about this already, but do you feel like the stakes have changed for renewable energy in New Mexico? And do you have a policy incentive for encouraging transitioning away from oil and gas and towards more renewables?
Well, I think it's definitely the frontier on diversification and opportunities for the renewable energy. There's been several good projects. If you drive east, going towards Tucumcari, my hometown, there's a brand new stretch of wind turbines there. And I think doing projects in those zoned areas, because the state definitely already has maps of where it's windy the most, right? Where it makes sense to have wind energy being captured. So I want to make sure we continue and move forward aggressively with those already identified areas and be a good partner with renewable companies that are going to come in and provide some jobs and put up those structures. And then when it comes to solar, same thing. I want to make sure that we're a good partner with solar, identifying the areas to put solar, and then just further diversifying and capturing that energy and being able to hopefully feed it into more of the New Mexico pipeline so that New Mexicans are using that energy. A lot of that energy right now is sent out of state, and I think there's going to be some opportunities to hopefully keep that here and incentivize them to continue to grow so we can have a more diverse. But really my main focus, because Stephanie has done such an amazing job at diversifying for renewable energy, is affordable housing and going into geothermal, because there's some opportunities on geothermal that hasn't been captured yet, and for any new land commissioner, that could be a really good pin in their hat. So I want to move forward with geothermal and affordable housing and really being able to have a place for New Mexicans to live in, because I know the energy and the renewable energy sector is already got some great footing underneath itself. It's about all those other things like jobs and economic development that really need its own footing right now.
So New Mexico has unique flora and fauna, but we're also facing increasing impacts from climate change. How would you approach the balance between land stewardship policies, like you mentioned before, and development, and that balance in relationship to climate change?
Well, for one, climate change is a reality, and I see it every day at the ranch, right? Like right now we're sitting mid-April and we haven't really had any rain at all, which is very rare. And I know a lot of our rain comes at the end of July, but still we would have had a better winter where there was at least would be some snowpack to count on, but we don't have any of that this year. So with that lived experience of knowing what it's like on the ground, going out to my ranch and feeling the grass and how it's crunchy and having to supplement a little bit more protein for my cows, I'm bringing that vision and that view when it comes to industries that we're regulating or industries that we're promoting to come to New Mexico. What is your impact? What does it look like for after the project's done? Yeah, you might have a lot of jobs in the initial building stage, but what does it look like once that industry has moved in, and what is the current, what's the long-term jobs going to look like, and what is the quality on the air and the impact on the water, what does that all equate to? And those are things that we got to look at case by case, but always with the mentality of we must protect our air, we must protect our ground, we must protect our water, because one thing that doesn't ever forget is our soil. Soil remembers everything, and water's not something that we have a plenty of here in New Mexico, so we want to make sure we're protecting it and using it in the most wise fashion. Down to even the kind of thinking about what plants and species are on the grounds on our rangeland, right? There's a lot of grazing leases on our state lands, and I think we could be a really good partner in going in there with those state grazing leases and saying, let's remove a lot of these mesquites. Let's remove a lot of these invasive species that are sucking from the aquifer. And yeah, that's a small step in the right direction, but that's the kind of thinking and mentality that a land commissioner needs. Looking at all angles and looking at all the different cost savings when it comes to our natural resources.
All right, last one, and it's kind of just like more of a fun one. What's the most underrated state park, in your opinion?
Ooh.
Conscious. I love Conscious Lake, and I love the state park over there at Conscious. Every time I go there, the water's so clean, and it's such a great environment. I wish more people would take advantage of it, so that's one of my favorites.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is really important to your campaign?
Well, I think one important thing is look at, like you asked about endorsements earlier. I don't have any endorsements, so I didn't think going in this like I would be the grassroots campaign that I am, but I truly am. And just look at who's endorsing who and how things have played out on a national level and what they're doing in your community, and to really feel your decision on, hey, is Jonas the right guy? Because really, he's going to bring a perspective that is unique to New Mexico. Not many rural, legislators out there anymore, especially that are Democrat. Look at his lived experience. Wow, he's already implemented policy on the ground that affects people's day-to-day lives. So, he should understand, how the policy from the land office will affect those communities that the state lands are located in. And then, could he really be the voice for me? And I would really kind of challenge people to reach out and get to know me and look at my resume and my background and what I've already done to say, yeah, I'm hopefully going to be your next land commissioner.
All right, yeah. And so last question is just like, where are you at in the campaign? How can people help support you if they're interested in what they just heard?
Perfect. Well, I need volunteers. I need people to come out here and help me get my message across. And also, I would love to get feedback. So you can email me at info@jonasmoya.com, or you could go to my website, jonasmoya.com. Check me out there as well. I'd love to have your support. And just remember, when you go to the polls, make sure you're voting for somebody that has your same values and beliefs, and that they have the resume that's going to be successful in that position. Because now more than ever, you might get stuck with that person for the next 8 years, right? They're only guaranteed 4, but you could be stuck with them for the next 8 years. So do your homework, make sure you're confident who you're voting for, and tell your friends to get out there and vote. And I would just appreciate as well as if you told them to get out to vote for Jonas. So thank you guys very much for having me.